And she told him that they'd have to talk to the priest because my mother was a devout Catholic. And down through the years on both sides of the family and all the different background of my family, they've been both. They've been Catholic and they've been non-Catholic and they've been even anti-Catholic in some instances. But and like I say, devout Catholic also, which is the exact polar opposite of anti-Catholic. So when he asked her to marry him, she said, well, she'd have to take him to see the priest. So she went to see the priest, and the priest told her to just tell your father and everything will be all right. And she said, well, you don't know my father. And she told the priest, and Father Schwartz at St. Aloysius. And he told her, well, Alice, you're 21, you can do as you please. And she said, well, that might apply to some people, but in my case, my father doesn't care how old you are. He'll still turn you over his knee if he feels like it. Although I don't believe he would have, but nevertheless, she thought he would. So, needless to say, Mother made my mother made my father promise to raise us children Catholic. And of course he promised, which guys that want to get married and have this woman be their wife for the rest of their life, they'll promise anything. And he promised. And he kept his word, but he got a little cranky about it at different times. But nevertheless, he went along with it basically. Well, when they were after they were married for about a year, my sister came along, Cecilia Ann. And Cecilia was born in 1923. And my father was working here in Columbus, and but he wasn't he couldn't find a real good job that he liked, so he had an opportunity to get a good job, a really good paying job for the times in Lima, Ohio. So they went to Lima, got themselves a little apartment right down the street from St. Rita's Hospital. And it's a good thing they did, because after they got there, they got there in sometime in the beginning of 1924. I don't know exactly when, but then in June of 1924, I was born. And Mother was right down the street from the hospital, so she didn't, he was at work, and she didn't bother they didn't have telephones like we do nowadays and good communication, so she just walked down the street half a block to the hospital to have me, and took my sister, who was 14 months old, had the landlady watch her while she was gone. And when he found out that he had a son, he almost fell off the engine. He got this job he had was at a place called Lima Locomotive Works, and he was what they called a hostler, Hostler, hostler. And what they did, they moved the engines out after the railroad engines were built and manufactured and built. He was one of the guys that would move them out and deliver them to different places. And then, they would bring him back to Lima. But nevertheless, that's the way he got started in Lima. Well, then he had an aunt and an uncle, Viola Ellis, lived in Annapolis. And so he decided, his Aunt Viola came from Kentucky, and so did the guy she married, Ellis. He was a shoemaker. He had a shoe shop. He repaired shoes right there in his house. Well, they liked it in Indianapolis. They lived in Indianapolis. They liked it real well. And they told him that he could get a job, a better job even, on the Pennsylvania Railroad, working in the railroad yards at Indianapolis. So he thought that would be great because he liked trains and working on trains. He'd done that a little bit up in Akron because his brother Leo, who he had went up there with, was a railroad, well, he ended up being an engineer on the railroad, but he was a fireman at the time. But my dad thought, well, that would be a good job to get and hold and keep the rest of his life, which was good until 1929 when the Depression hit. And when the Depression hit in 1929, we were hard pressed to. He had to go out every day. He got furloughed on a railroad. They laid him off for what they call it, a furlough, and he got furloughed in 1929 and or 1930. I don't know which. Maybe 1930. By that time I was going to the first grade at St. Philip Neri in Indianapolis, Indiana. We lived right across the street from the school, and that's where my sister and I both went to school. And I did not really, even though I was 6 years old, and that was in 1930, and she was 7. She had skipped a grade, so she was in the 3rd grade, and I was in the 1st. And I didn't like it really because the nuns were scary. They told me that if I didn't quit talking in school, they were going to cut my tongue off and put it in a jar and send it home to my mother. And they used to tell me that we didn't have zippers in pants in those days. We had buttons, and I was a little fellow. I didn't know how. Sometimes I'd forget to button my pants, and they would always put a sign. They made a sign and pinned it on my shirt. Said, "Don't let your horsey get out of the barn," and all. It was just, I didn't like it. Let's put it that way. So. Well, we stayed there until the following year, 1931. The summer of 1930, we left and came to Columbus. It still was Depression. We came to Columbus, Ohio, where my grandfather, by this time being a widow, he had been a widow because, as I told you, my mother took care of the kids for him. And he was still a widow. Some of his kids were out and married, but he still had. He had Aunt Colette, Aunt Catherine, Aunt Mary, and Uncle Stephen. So he had 3 teenage girls and a teenage boy, or 10-year-old boy, or something like that. I can't remember how old. Uncle Stephen was maybe 12 when we first came back over, and himself, and they were all living in a 2-bedroom house on Clarendon Avenue, and the 4 of us moved in. My sister Cecilia and I, my dad and mom. Well, my dad and mom had to sleep on a couch downstairs, and my sister and I slept at the foot of the bed where Aunt Catherine, Aunt Mary, and Aunt Colette slept. They all 3 slept in one bed, and we slept at the foot of the bed, crisscross, feet to face, if you will. And that's how we were living for a while and that's where I went to the 2nd grade in St. Aloysius. And it was not any better than St. Philip Neri as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I still had nuns, and they were still. I was always, all my life, I thought nuns were scary, and they were. Like some people were afraid of clowns. I was always afraid of nuns. And after we spent that whole school year there, that summer we decided, when school let out, my dad and mom decided, of course kids never know what's going on, but my dad and mom decided that we were going to move out to the East End with my Aunt Flo, which was his sister from Kentucky. She had moved up to Columbus and was married to a man named Foster Chase, which is my middle name, and I was named my middle name after him, and he was thrilled. He thought I was really something. He bought me my first pair of long pants. I was 7 years old when he bought those for me. But anyway, we moved out there with her, and consequently, when the school took up again, I had to go to St. John's it's either on Champion or Ohio, I can't remember which. We lived on Ohio, so it had to be on Champion, I guess. Anyhow, I went to third grade there, and so there was 3 schools, 3 years in school already, 3 different schools in the first 3 years of school. And then, of course, after we lived there, for that school year and into the summer, and my mother used to take us and we would walk from there. That's on the east side. We would walk down to Main Street and then walk all the way in Main Street and all the way over to the west side to see my grandfather on the hilltop. And that was quite a walk. But we didn't have money to take a bus they didn't have buses, they had streetcars. And we didn't have the 6 cents for an adult and 3 cents for 2 children for her to, so that was only 12 cents. She didn't have it she couldn't afford to spend it to get it to ride. So sometimes my grandpa would give it to her to go home on, but going out we'd walk. It was good for us, so. But then after that school year was up, my mother wanted to get a house of her own. She didn't want to live with other people anymore. And so they looked around the west side and they found a place. And I can't remember where we lived about maybe 6 or 7 or 8 different places on the west side in the course of my time in Columbus. That's how many, we moved all over the west side. But is this thing working, you sure?
I'm gonna go check.
I'm just hoping that
You're not talking to yourself?
that I'm not talking for naught.
Yeah. No, we're good.
All right. Okay, well, is
Yeah.
it working?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
How long do you think you've been talking?
I don't know.
This doesn't seem right, but it says it's 12 minutes and 47 seconds.
Well, it's probably right.
That can't be right.
You think it's longer than that?
I can't believe I mowed the lawn in that. I had to go mow the lawn out front.
Huh.
So something's, I don't know. It's
know.
working though.
Okay. All right,
you
well,
When you're done, give me a holler because I want to add a couple. Well, actually, no. I'll just add them. I'll grab another piece of paper.
oh, here. You just add it on here. Just put it on there.
Okay.
And then turn it back to,
Okay.
because tell me what the next subject was after I was on, let me see. No, that's not.
Must be the next page.
About mom and dad and about the favorite aunts. Okay. So as to my mother and father, of course, I don't think it's any secret that everybody knows that I thought I had wonderful parents. I did. They were great people. They loved us, all of us children. And I suppose that for the 3 of us, we'd all have different ideas about the way we were raised and different things. But my feeling is that well, first, I've told my both sisters that I always felt like I wasn't very bright because they both skipped the first grade, both of them, and I didn't. Plus the fact that I always struggled in school, but it was mainly because I wasn't really interested. They couldn't keep me interested in school. It was just boring. And I really, truly think if I'd went to public school, I might have done better. Because I think, like I said before, that the nuns are like clowns to me. Some people are afraid of clowns. Some people, I'm afraid. I don't like nuns. And so